K-On! Is a masterpiece, a misunderstood masterpiece. Well, kind of. Sure, it is just cute girls doing cute things like the detractors will tell you, but if that was all the show was, then I could guarantee you that I wouldn't have made this video. You have to be more than that to be such a big success, and the purpose of this video will sort of be to tell you what makes it work, and not only that, but what also makes it one of the best slice-of-life animes to ever exist. So I found out about K-On! After I watched A Silent Voice, which is my favorite movie. The reason why I would bring up that film, though, is that the director of that film is Naoko Yamada, and before working on A Silent Voice, she worked on K-On! And probably a bunch of other stuff I still need to check out. So my question leading up to me watching it was, how good of a director was Yamada before she made this feature film, and will K-On! Hold up a decade after its conclusion? But judging off the fact that this video exists at all, you can say that I wasn't disappointed, as this is easily the fastest I've ever binge-watched a show, as even if it's not my absolute favorite, it's still high up there. But you just want to hear my opinion on it, so I'll give you it. The story of K-On! Is as simple as you can get. It follows a band of 4 and later on 5 as we see their everyday lives. That's it. Some may be disappointed by this simple plot synopsis, but I'm pretty sure by knowing it alone, you can tell that the show is far more character-based than story-based. And as someone who values characters most in anything, that makes me very happy. What I find so intriguing about the show's story too is how it's an anime about any action, drama, or romance. Removing aspects that make it easier to write a story allows the writers to challenge themselves by writing about life, and that alone. As much as I love slice-of-life animes with some sort of twist to make it interesting, I have to give props to this show for straying away from that. In portraying life in a more realistic manner, it gives your story more relatability, while still maintaining a blissful tone that makes for a very well-executed and uniquely told story that many like it can't replicate. The pacing, on the other hand, starts very fast. The first season alone, despite being a short 14 episodes, covers 2 whole years of these characters' lives, but in Season 2 we get twice the number of episodes, and it only covers 1 year. And while the pace being slower may seem like a bad thing, it really isn't, as we get to see more of these characters, and given how the show is character-based, that just makes it work even better. So the story and pacing aren't amazing, but they get the job done. I think it would be better to get the whole stupid dub versus sub shit out of the way now instead of later. So I watched the dub because I hate reading with a burning passion, even though I read out these scripts for these videos and writing is one of my biggest passions. Okay, I watched it because I can't read fast. But to be fair, the English voice acting, while not being anything top-notch, is still really good. My favorite being Yui, but let's be real, I couldn't be more biased. I just like the cute high-pitched voices. Seriously though, I've yet to find a straight-up awful English dub, and I hate the argument because of the elitists that ruin anime for others by bullying people who just want to watch their foreign media in English. But if an English dub is significantly worse or different than the original sub, with no enjoyment to be had, then I would implore that people would watch the sub over the dub. I feel like that's something I must explain, as I don't want to portray myself as falling into any extremes. I don't hate subs and I don't worship dubs. I'm a normal person, and I hope the elites of both sides can be ones too. But if you want to know which language is better to watch the show in, don't ask me, because I'm far from the best source for comparisons. But I'm now going to move on to the part I actually care about, which is the character analysis, and good god do I have a lot to analyze. This scene may be one you've heard a lot of people praise if you've seen any review on YouTube, and it really is as good as they say, as it introduces us to our main character almost entirely through visuals, the character in question being Yui, who is my personal favorite. While I have all these deep reasons for liking a main character, whether it's that I can relate to them or root for them, the primary reason why she's my favorite character is that she's adorable. A good reason, I know. I also find her, along with most characters in the show, to be hilarious. The fact that she joined the Light Music Club, not out of a passion for music, but simply out of the fact that she has such little aspirations in life that she just assumed being in a club would require little challenge, is pretty amusing. That's also why seeing her growth is the most fun. She's the character who changes the most as we see her finally think about what she wants to do in life. Instead of repeating the overdone be yourself message, Yui instead has to find herself and what makes her special, which, while not being something I could personally relate to, is still important, and the fact that I still enjoyed this is a testament to its good writing. What I love most, though, is that despite that, she still is the most relatable character to me. The part of her character I found myself resonating with so much was definitely the fact that it feels nearly impossible for the two of us to focus on anything we don't have any real interest in. But when we find something that finally clicks and a community who can support us, we thrive and show the world that we mean something and help others as a result. Whether it's making people happy by singing a sappy J-pop song or by writing a dumb video about people who do exactly that. But what I love most is that regardless of her good qualities, she's still a very flawed character. She's clumsy, easily distracted, a foodie, and doesn't have the greatest memory. But regardless, I believe this just humanizes her more, as it tells people, hey, you don't have to be perfect to be liked, but instead you should utilize the traits that you do have to be the best version of yourself possible, which sometimes does mean minimizing most flaws, and while she does change and evolve a lot, her flaws stay mostly the same, as change is often gradual, and that's just another way the show hammers in that message of time. And hell, to people like me and a lot of the other characters, our flaws aren't even that big of a deal, and can even be something that makes her more entertaining. It's honestly kinda nice to see someone like her be accepted by everyone else in spite of her differences. But in speaking of that message I just talked about, the amount of in-universe time for her to truly take music seriously is significant. But when she finally does at the end of the series' first season, it's truly accomplishing to see. Now, that doesn't mean we see her development stop after Season 1. In Season 2, we see how desperately Yui wants to avoid change, and while this theme is shared throughout all of our main cast, I'd argue that Yui has the worst in this scenario, because unlike the rest of the band, she doesn't really know where to go if the band disbands once they go their separate ways, which is why I express so much concern for her, as the skills she's been developing may end up becoming pointless, which is why near the end of Season 2, I was nearly swayed to tears once it caught up to Yui and the rest of the band that this might be their final time together to perform. And from a lot of reviews I've seen online, I've heard a lot of people broke down with the main characters, as they could relate to never being able to see their friends again after high school, and how everything changing so fast is so chaotic and saddening. Now obviously there are some more episodes in a movie after this, so a happy ending for the characters becomes a little more predictable, but regardless, I was still at the edge of my seat by the end of the movie, excited about these characters I felt I had grown up with had concluded their story. And it really fits for a show with such a feel-good tone to end on such a happy note. Talking about one character at a time was too easy, so now we're doing two. Mio and Ritsu are best friends, but despite being so, they tend to have a whole ton of banter, and their main way of communicating is through teasing each other, the way they do so varying for the two of them. Ritsu pokes fun at how shy and easily embarrassed Mio is, repeatedly bringing up a particular incident that happens at the midway point of Season 1. She also goes to extreme lengths to scare Mio, as she is instantly frightened by anything even remotely scary. But before we move on, I also wanted to quickly mention how Mio should have been the character I related to the most, as while we're both capable of social interaction, we prefer to keep to ourselves, and we're both pretty easily frightened, but honestly, her character is exaggerated to such a degree that relating to her is very difficult, even though I wouldn't even say that's a bad thing, as she's one of the show's most popular characters for a reason. A lot of anime fans resonate with this type of character, and I wouldn't change that anyway, as I still like the character myself. But on the other side of the coin, Mio teases Ritsu for being overly tomboyish, and whenever she does anything that pisses her off, she proceeds to hit her on the head. But for the first 3/4 of the series' first season, that's all their relationship really was. And aside from the fact that we've known they've been friends since grade school, I started to feel that the two characters should just cut ties, which almost happened. Kind of. Near the end of Season 1, Mio befriends Nodoka, who is a friend of Yui, which gives her an easy opportunity to befriend her. Once Mio tells Ritsu about her new friendship, and instead of being proud of her, she gets angry and starts to avoiding Mio in the hopes that it'll send a message that the only friend she can have is her, which, while being a selfish thing to do, isn't uncommon, and while the show points out that it is a bad thing to do, it shows that Ritsu feels like she needs Mio when Mio doesn't need Ritsu anymore. Anyway, Ritsu in this state ends up getting sick. Mio ends up going to her house after being seriously concerned about where she's been the last couple of months. Months? What? How could I misread it like that? No, I'm keeping it in the fucking video. I've re-recorded this fucking bullshit so many days. And in what I like to call one of the best scenes of the series, Mio sits down to talk to her. And instead of being some overly dramatic bullshit, it really does just feel like a conversation between two friends. And that level of realism really allowed me to like them even more. And that's when it finally hit me why their relationship is so powerful, and it's because they don't mind the teasing. And while it can get out of hand sometimes, they power through it and settle their differences. They feel immense joy while hanging out together, and by the end it truly shows off the capabilities of long-term storytelling, as my perspective of these characters completely changed throughout one episode, without making me feel like I was cheated, which is why I believe that this character arc is the one that concluded the strongest. But you are likely saying, what do they do during Season 2? Which you may end up being disappointed to find out that they don't have nearly as much going on. But since their dynamic is where the comedy hits its strongest, I really don't mind at all. But we also get some insight into how Mio and Ritsu became friends in the first place, which is something I've always wondered about. But we also see how much Ritsu truly cares about drumming in a fantastic flashback scene. Overall, I'd say that Mio and Ritsu's friendship is probably where the show hits its almost too unsubtle message of friendship the strongest. And their friendship reminds me a hell of a lot of the friendships I've made, just to a far less cartoony extent. Okay, we're almost done, right? Thought so. Mugi is kind of the black sheep of the band. In terms of character arcs, the only one she really has is one that she shares with all of the band, which is trying to find a sense of community. But I'd say the rest of the characters cover those themes better than Mugi. But after describing all of this, I think I have found out what type of character Mugi is, which is somewhat of a straight man archetype, which is ironic given how she's a gay woman. And speaking of that detail, it's only really expanded on in one episode, which, while seeming like a missed opportunity due to the lack of LGBT representation, is a decision I can at least understand, as the romantic angle of the series is almost non-existent. But going back on track, Mugi is rich, blunt, sweet, and polite. Out of all of the characters, she seems to have it all together, which is where the comedy of her character comes in, because the only things Mugi has yet to experience in life are basic things most other people would have, like going to a fast food restaurant or an arcade. The amount of joy she goes from simply going to a hardware store for friends is infectious. But all of this doesn't mean she's perfect. She's easily the biggest reason as to why the band rarely actually practices their music, but I'd say that my favorite episode centered around her is also, I'm pretty sure, the only episode she gets dedicated to herself, and it's one where she asks Ritsu to smack her on the head, something that Mio does to Ritsu all the time, but a connection Mugi doesn't have with anyone. What makes this such a good episode, though, is how Mugi is so likable that no matter what she does, nobody gets angry at her. I feel it shows off her character probably the best in the entire series. The sense of community she got from her club, while not being something she quite needed, shows off how much finding a true group of people you can call your friend matters. That's why, even if there is not as much change in Mugi's character, she's still a vital part of what makes the show so special. Okay, I lied about Yui. She's still my favorite, though. What I lied about is that I believe she isn't the character who changes the most, because Azusa changes just as much as her. What makes this funny, though, is that she isn't even introduced until halfway through Season 1. But when that time comes, we see Azusa as just another freshman who has an interest in music, resulting in her wanting to join the jazz club. However, when she sees the performance of the light music club, she chooses that one as her club of choice. So in the next episode, she joins them, and then she starts to realize how seriously the band takes slacking off instead of practicing. This starts to demotivate her, and she even tells the band that she's considering quitting. The other characters, in a panic, proceed to show her what makes this club so special. Not the music they make, but the process of doing so and the fun they have together. After having enough patience, she decides to stay, as the connection she's formed with the club is really special to her. But closer to the end of Season 2, she's quick to realize that her time with the band will probably be over, as everyone except for her will be graduating, while likely not having enough club members for the next year, meaning that that era of her life will be over. The whole show has been about taking it slow. If you've watched any review on YouTube, you know that this turtle shows up in most episodes as a metaphor for how the show and its characters will take its time. Hell, in that season, they have a pet turtle later on. And again, I mentioned the scene where all the characters finally realize that the turtle has caught up, and how sad it is, but Azusa knew about that before anyone else. After all of the characters come to this realization, however, the movie centers around how Yui, as a farewell, wants to create a song just for her to celebrate all of the good times they had together, and it's legitimately such a good way to tie a knot on one of the series' better characters. But in speaking of Yui, she is what makes Azusa such a good character at all. While Yui needs to learn to take life more seriously, Azusa needs to learn how to take life less seriously, and I think that's what gives them such an interesting friendship. But yeah, she eventually does settle down, and I think it does a good job at showing why extremes just don't work. Surely productive people give themselves deadlines, while also procrastinating as much as they need to. Oh, that's exactly what I do, and I just love how the show reinforces that. What's so funny about Sawako is how dramatically my opinion of her changed as the series went on. At first, she was a calm and formal music teacher. A couple of episodes later, though, you learn about her backstory, where she states that she used to be a member of a club, but instead of performing pop music, she performed death metal, and she did it all because she was a simp. The guy, while telling her he's one to like extreme and edgy women, still didn't end up interested in her. That is why, as an adult, she tries as hard as possible to repress any mentions of her musical life, as she feels no one will like her if they find out about her pretty embarrassing past, and how it deeply contradicts the current version of herself. This insecurity of hers is so powerful, in fact, that it allows the band to recruit her as their advisor, as long as her days in high school are kept a secret. She also has a running gag where she shows off her borderline absurd talent for sewing. That makes me question why she has a teaching job at all. Oh wait, it's because she wanted to impress a separate guy who eventually dumped her anyway. I'm really not surprised. Seriously though, these scenes can be really funny sometimes, but most of the time it just feels like they wanted to put these cute characters in cute outfits for the neckbeards of the audience to gawk at, so I can see how one would find them unnecessary, or even uncomfortable in some cases. So far it made it sound like the character is solely played off as a joke, but there is actually parts of her character that are taken seriously. In Season 2, one of her former band members tells her about how they plan on bringing the band back one last time, which the girls find out about after failing to eavesdrop on the two. The band member then tells the girls that she's told Sawako this plan, but she doesn't want to go through with it, in case anyone in the school would find out about her skills in heavy metal. So while she'll still obviously be attending, instead of her doing guitar and vocals, it'll be Yui, who is the last person I'd expect to lead a metal band, which is why when she does perform, she makes the band look cute and goofy, which is why Sawako eventually loses it and snakes the guitar out of Yui's hand, and finally lets Death Devil perform once again. Now, obviously, the students in the school pick up on this, but instead of treating her differently and shaming her, the students just tell her how awesome her performance was, and it's at that point she's finally learned to not hide the events of her past. What I particularly like about this character, though, is that it shows that anyone, regardless of age, can struggle to take off their masks, and I like how it's this character who has to learn that. Ui is Yui's younger sister, and given Yui's personality, you'd expect her to be even more full of energy, but she actually acts more as a mother figure to Yui, which is both oddly sad and funny. This is easily the most unique sibling dynamic I've seen in any show, and that uniqueness is what makes it so good, but the show fully takes advantage of how unique it is, and that's great. Ui seems to be a better version of Yui to a lot of people. People generally find her more attractive, she's better around the house, etc. But what makes her so interesting is that despite being better than Yui in a lot of ways, she feels as if she's always a step behind her, mainly due to the 1-year age difference, but it's still so interesting to me. Despite seeming so well adjusted, though, I actually kind of worry more for Ui than anyone else, as well her sister depends on her for food, clean clothes, everything, since Yui spends her entire life dedicated to helping Yui, to the point that she breaks down in a mere memorization that during a school field trip she won't be coming back home with her for just one day. I actually believe that when Yui is in college, that Yui will feel a lot more lonely and need to go through the same arc that Yui did of finding what makes her special, and showing a character that already seems to be perfect and how that's not really true is just genius to me, especially since the show is decently subtle with this too. And after explaining that, was sort of my ah shit moment of realizing why she said she feels behind her sister, and it's because she hasn't found anything that she can find passion out in outside of helping others. And don't get me wrong, it's great to help others, but I'd say focusing on yourself is the most important part of life. I was originally not going to write a part about Ui, but I'm glad I did, as I appreciate the character a hell of a lot more now. For a show of relatively low stakes like K-On!, the animators didn't really need to go all out, except for the performance scenes, which all look great, especially in the movie. But for the benefit of the viewers, the animation is good rather than being passable like it very well could have been. What Kyoto Animation likes to do is put their efforts into expression, whether it's used to be more realistic or used to exaggerate. Something else great I realized, though, when editing this video is how even without audio and subtitles, it's still pretty easy to tell the emotions of the characters, and all this stuff is the reason why Kyoto Animation is one of the more unappreciated animation studios in the industry, and K-On! Is yet another reason to respect their work. This aspect of the show is one I don't see enough people talk about, and it's the comedy. This show wasn't even intended to be a comedy, or at least it seems like that, but I laughed out loud way too many times per episode. Every character just has something about them that's at least a bit comedic, and the writers utilize that to great effect. The comedy is almost entirely character-based, which heavily explains why my average laughs per episode were significantly higher upon a rewatch. But when you start to like the characters more, the more you're just kind of willing to go along with what they do. And that is really what does make the comedy work so well, and make it work way better than it really has any right to. And I feel it's just such a testament to how well written the show is. Every series has music, but I feel especially inclined to talk about all the music in K-On! Because the main characters make and perform music, and I'm happy to say that the music in K-On! Did not disappoint. So let's start with what I'd argue is the most essential part of any show's music, and that would be the openings or OPs. OPs can be used in many ways, but what I like so much about K-On! Is how it uses its openings to set its tone in a way that I like a lot. The opening starts with a more serious guitar section, which symbolizes what many thought K-On! Would be in the first 5 minutes of episode 1. Shortly after that, it's interrupted by a far more playful, carefree, and jovial beat that symbolizes just how fun the series is to watch. The entire song is just so catchy, I can almost never get it out of my head. The second OP, however, is one I do personally like, and is similar to the first opening in a lot of ways, but I don't nearly like it as much as the first one. And it's probably because of the song, because I'd say the animation in this one is just as good. The final opening, though, is pretty disappointing. I tried giving it a chance on multiple occasions, but more often than not, I just pressed the skip button. I probably just got my expectations up way too high, though, since it's the final one. Okay, now we can move on to the OST. Oh wait, I realized that the end credit music exists. The first two end credit songs just kind of exist, but I actually kind of like the final one, as it tonally works pretty well, while also heavily drifting away from the other songs of the series. The soundtrack of K-On!, on the other hand, is magnificent. I feel like I described it perfectly here when I pointed out that the relaxed music reminded me a lot of Animal Crossing. If I were to pick my favorites, they would be Have Some Tea, Morning Dew, Cotton Candy, and Happy End, which is my personal favorite. Ending every episode of the sonnet is such a good idea that I started doing it myself. But I can't finish talking about the music in K-On! Without talking about the performance scenes, and while I've already mentioned that the animation gets a noticeable buff in these sections, what I haven't mentioned is the music that the characters themselves perform, and I love them all. Now, the only one that's a standout to me is Fua Fua Time, but the other songs are good too. But god, is Fua Fua Time fantastic. I find all versions of the song to be a genuine jam, but my favorite one is the one exclusively sung by Yui, because main character. Also, I just love her voice. There's something else I wanted to mention, though, and that's how the songs they perform probably wouldn't be songs I'd care about if it wasn't for the show they appeared in. Multiple times in the series, characters will tell them that their music isn't even all that good, which is probably true, but I just can't help but love the music when it's attached to this excellent series and these excellent characters. These aren't just songs to me, they're an extension of the show, and that's the beauty of music and entertainment. But I think that's it. Of course it isn't. I discovered K-On! As a teenager, and during a time where I was overly worried about my future. Hell, I still worry about my future from time to time, but I'm glad that the show came to me, as it told me, hey, your future's important, but you should set your main priorities in the moment, or you won't be as happy as you would want to, and I feel like I've finally started to get that message, as this YouTube channel is my way of taking my passions and finding a way to use them now, instead of waiting for that golden opportunity to come out of nowhere. But despite hard work being important, you can't overwork yourself. You have to relax to make the best art you possibly can. And while the characters in the show take that a bit too far, it's vital to making your best work. I understand why someone wouldn't like K-On! Like all media, it's not for everyone, and I'm obviously not telling you that you should like it. As well as I enjoy it as much as I do, it's not perfect. But something I hear a lot from people who don't like the show is that they came to anime to escape from their everyday struggles, and watching an anime about everyday life isn't appealing in a medium full of otherworldly, bizarre-ass shit. But I'd say that K-On! Provides its own unique sense of escapism, given its incredibly happy tone, but even then it's not unrealistic of that happiness, and like anyone else, these characters do face enough struggles for the show to remain relatable. What's crazy though is that I didn't even realize how good the series was until I finished writing this video. When you start looking at something in a more analytical light is when you've truly known that you've found something special. And I'm so glad that this show, as well as its movie, truly ended up holding up as some of my favorite pieces of media. K-On! Is a masterpiece. Thank you so much for watching. Yes, I'm aware that this video is nearly a year late. I'm sorry. It's just that this video went over multiple rewrites, and that along of its length ended up making it a video stuck in production hell. If you enjoyed watching this video, then you may like my Letterboxd account, where I give my opinions on kids' movies. I have a review of the K-On! Movie there, so if you want to hear my opinions on the movie, then that post would definitely be a better place to see them than this video was. Out of all the shows I've reviewed in my reviewing every anime I've watched video, this is the first one that's earned its own dedicated video, and it will not be the last one. So if you liked this video and want to see more anime videos from me, then I would adore a subscription. Anyway, I have nothing more to say, so I'll see you another time.